In today's video, I'll be teaching you how to do the perfect burst fade in 3 easy steps. Not only will you see the cut, but you will also learn the reasoning for the specific steps and guidelines. But first, we need to know the specific tools we're going to be using. First, your choice of clippers. Second, 2 specific trimmers. And then third, balders of your choice. Fourth, standard and taper comb. Fifth, regular and thinning shears. Before we start the cut, I wet my client's hair in the same direction I will eventually have it styled. Our first step after wetting our client's hair is to debulk with our 1.5 guard open. We begin flicking out in a half circle starting at the temple, working our way to the back of the ear. Thinking of our client's hair as a blank canvas, this is the pre-phase of our initial sketch. We are removing the excess we don't need in order to start our guidelines. If your client does not have any bulk, you can actually ignore this step and move straight into your fade guidelines. Moving on to our second step, make sure to get an idea of where you want to put your guidelines. We will start our guidelines with open, no guard. For burst fades, since it has such a tight gradient, I like to do a finger's length below where we took off our bulk. If your client did not need bulk taken off, you would start your open, no guard guideline right below the temple. The temple and the back of the ear will have a lower starting and ending point than your middle section that's right above the ear. This is because we essentially want to make the fade seem like it's bursting outwards. Most people tend to start high at the temple and then tighten and lower it behind the ear. If you do that, it tends to not have a burst or popping effect. Next up is the trimmers. We want to make sure that it stays half a finger length below our open, no guard guideline. As soon as you get close to half a finger's length, make sure to flick out so we don't get a harsh guideline. If you prefer to tap the blade down for the guideline, just make sure that your clippers are properly zero gap to take out that trimmer line. If they're not, I like my method to where you can just flick out. It's not going to leave a harsh guideline. Moving on to the balders, since we are working on such a tight section, I like to just use the top of the foil shaver as to not create any harsh guidelines that will make the haircut any harder than it needs to be. You're seeing me do closed no guard to take out the trimmer line. So as to not confuse anyone watching, we will actually be moving into our third step, which will be lever playing. The reason I say not to confuse anyone is because for beginners and apprentices that I taught, I find it easier to take the second and third step into sections. What I mean by that is we will do our guideline, which is the second step, then lever play the initial guidelines out, which of course is our third step. Afterwards, we then move to a higher guard, then follow steps 2 and 3 again. Before we move into our half guard, notice for fading, I am corner notching about 90% of the time. Corner notching just means I'm using the 25% of the left or right side of the clipper blade. With this technique, I am able to get into higher spots without creating a new guideline. Following steps 2, we create our guideline with our half guard open and raise it half a finger's length. Due to the burst fade being on the side of the head, we can get our guideline tighter than the back of the head. The sides of the head are easier to fade out just due to not having too many bumps or protruding bone structures. We then follow step number 3 and lever play with our half guard closed to knock out the section we created with our half guard open. Make sure to corner notch as much as possible, that way we don't create a new guideline, raising the fade higher than we want. With our 1 guard, we move straight into step number 3 because of already doing the half guard open. The 1 guard closed will equal the half guard open. Make sure to flick out as much as possible because we then move to the clipper over comb. But before that, really pay attention and make sure to go in an up and down motion and not a left to right motion when corner notching behind the ear. A lot of times people will go into a left and right motion instead of up and down, and that will cause the burst fade to expand more than we want it to. I like to do my clipper over comb with the taper comb due to it having tighter teeth and allowing me to get into specific areas a regular comb with natural teeth could not. When we clipper over comb, we make sure to only cut a 1/4 inch at a time, just so we don't cut too high and cut too much. When we get our initial section, we can then follow that guide throughout the rest at the half circle pattern we made with our 1.5 open. You should notice that I comb down as much as I can just to make sure that I'm on the right layer and I'm not cutting anything I'm not supposed to. I do a couple cuts with the clip over comb, then I comb down just to make sure that that line is faded, and then I can move into my next section. We could leave the haircut as is after doing clipper over comb, but we want to make sure that our client is going to get the best service and cut in our area. So we go in with my favorite part, and that's the detailing phase. For detailing, I continue to use the taper comb because I'm only going in select areas where I notice dark spots. We will use regular and thinning shears. Regular shears will be used to test the waters of how dense a certain dark spot is. Then we use thinning shears sparingly. We never leave the cut after using thinning shears due to it splitting the hair strand. So after using thinning shears, we then move back to regular shears to clean up the split ends that were made. Afterwards, we move into our trimmers that are only used for lineups. Make sure he gets a nice C point, only using the corners of the trimmers and then moving into the V in the back. The V in the back can alter depending on your client's preference, but for us, we will start almost right at earlobe level and work our way to the middle of the neck. We are closing up on finishing the burst fade, so let's go over his top section. We want to go with a messy texture top, so I'll use some texturizing shears sparingly, just to thin out the hair a bit and then go back in with regular shears. Again, making sure to not leave any dead ends, we then go back in with regular shears and cut any loose strands that we see. Once we finish the top, get your choice of pomade. I like to use the one that I created in-house, and that's used in my barbershop. You want something with a decent strong hold that's not going to stick so much where your client can't run his hands through. All said and done, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video and you learned the easy 3-step process to get the perfect burst fade. If you enjoyed the content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more educational videos.